The crack of a gunshot split the morning air as Gemma Grayson ducked behind the water trough, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was 1876 in Wildwood Creek, Arizona territory, and this was the third time this week someone had tried to scare her off her land. She clutched her father's old Winchester rifle, taking a steadying breath before peering over the wooden edge. The shooter was gone, but the message was clear: a woman had no business running a ranch alone in these parts. "Miss Grayson, you all right?" The voice belonged to her ranch hand, Tom Wheeler, who came barreling around the corner of the barn, shotgun in hand. "I'm fine, Tom," she replied, brushing dust from her skirts as she stood. "Just another warning shot." Tom's weathered face crinkled with concern. "Madam, with all due respect, you can't keep ignoring these threats. Them Peterson boys ain't gonna stop till they run you off this land." Gemma's jaw tightened. "My father didn't build this ranch for me to abandon it at the first sign of trouble." "It ain't the first sign, madam. It's been 6 months since your pa passed, and every day it's something new. Cattle rustled, fences cut, now gunshots." Tom removed his hat, twisting it in his hands. "Maybe you should consider selling to the Petersons." "Ain't no shame in, there's plenty of shame in giving up what's rightfully mine," Gemma interrupted, her green eyes flashing. "I was born on this land, Tom. I'll die on it too if that's what it takes." Tom sighed, recognizing the futile argument. "At least let me ride into town, see if Sheriff Mills will send someone out." "The sheriff's made it perfectly clear where he stands," Gemma replied bitterly. "Said a woman has no business running a ranch alone and suggested I find myself a husband." She checked her rifle, making sure it was loaded. "We've got work to do. The south pasture fence still needs mending." As Tom reluctantly headed toward the stables, Gemma caught a glimpse of her reflection in the water trough. At 24, she still had her youth, but the past 6 months had worn on her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her once lustrous auburn hair was hastily pinned beneath a practical hat. Her mother would hardly recognize the refined young lady she'd raised to attend teas and socials. "Miss Gemma." The high voice of Eliza, the housekeeper's 10-year-old daughter, rang across the yard. "Riders coming." Gemma's grip tightened on her rifle as she scanned the horizon. 3 horses approached, dust rising from their hooves as they traveled up the long drive to the ranch house. She recognized the first rider immediately: Henry Peterson, the eldest son of the neighboring rancher who'd been trying to absorb her property into his growing empire. The others were strangers, though one rode with the unmistakable ease of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. "Tom," Gemma called, not taking her eyes off the approaching men. "We've got company." Tom appeared by her side, shotgun at the ready. "Want me to send them packing?" "No," she replied firmly. "We'll hear what they have to say, but keep that shotgun handy." As the riders drew closer, Gemma took in the appearance of the unfamiliar men. One was clearly Peterson's foreman, a burly man with a permanently sour expression. The other was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin. His dark hat shadowed his face, but she could make out a strong jawline beneath several days' worth of stubble. There was something in his posture, a quiet confidence that made her wary. "Miss Grayson," Henry Peterson greeted her with a nod that fell short of respectful. "Fine morning." "It was until someone took a shot at my water trough," she replied coolly. Peterson had the decency to look surprised. "Wasn't any of my men, I can assure you." "Of course not," Gemma said, not believing him for a moment. "What can I do for you, Mr. Peterson?" "I've come to introduce my new ranch hand," Peterson gestured to the tall stranger. "This here's Zachary Eastwood, best tracker and horseman this side of the Mississippi, or so they say." The stranger tipped his hat, revealing piercing blue eyes that assessed her with unexpected intelligence. "Madam, Mr. Eastwood," she acknowledged with a curt nod before turning back to Peterson. "Is that all?" Peterson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I also wanted to remind you that my offer still stands. $5,000 for this spread is more than fair considering." "Considering what, Mr. Peterson?" "That I'm a woman. That I've managed to keep this ranch running despite your best efforts to ruin me." "Now, Miss Grayson, that's a serious accusation," Peterson said, his voice hardening. "I'm simply trying to be practical. A pretty young thing like you should be married with children, not struggling to manage a failing ranch." Tom stepped forward, shotgun shifting slightly. "You best watch your tone, Peterson." Peterson's foreman moved his hand to his holster, but the stranger Eastwood held up a hand, staying him without a word. "Your ranch isn't failing because you're a woman, Miss Grayson," Peterson continued. "It's failing because you're stubborn. The drought's getting worse. Cattle prices are dropping. Without proper manpower, you won't last the summer." Gemma lifted her chin. "Then I suppose I'll have to prove you wrong. Your father was a good man, but he did you no favors leaving you to fend for yourself," Peterson said, shaking his head. "Think about my offer. Won't stay open indefinitely." As Peterson turned his horse to leave, Eastwood lingered a moment longer, his gaze meeting Gemma's. Something passed between them, not sympathy, exactly, but a flicker of respect. "Madam," he said again, touching the brim of his hat before following his employer. Gemma watched them ride away, unease settling in her stomach. "Tom, I want the men to ride in pairs from now on. No one works alone, especially near the property line." "Yes, madam. What about that new hand of Peterson's? Seems different from his usual hired muscle." "Keep an eye on him," Gemma replied, unable to shake the feeling that Zachary Eastwood was more than he appeared to be. "I don't trust anyone who works for Henry Peterson." That night, after checking the livestock and securing the barn, Gemma sat at her father's desk in the study, poring over the ranch ledgers by lamplight. The numbers were grim, just as Peterson had said. The drought had forced her to sell off more cattle than planned, and several of her best hands had left for steadier work after her father's death. Without the spring roundup going well, the ranch would be in serious trouble. A soft knock at the door interrupted her calculations. Martha, the housekeeper who'd been with the family since Gemma was a child, entered with a tray of tea. "You need to rest, Miss Gemma," the older woman chided gently. "Working yourself to exhaustion won't bring the rain." Gemma smiled tiredly. "I know, Martha. Just trying to make sense of these numbers." Martha set down the tray and peered over Gemma's shoulder at the ledger. Though she couldn't read well, she knew enough about the ranch's operations to understand their predicament. "Your father always said worries like a rocking chair gives you something to do but doesn't get you anywhere. He also said a rancher who doesn't worry is a rancher who's about to lose everything," Gemma countered, rubbing her temples. Martha laid a weathered hand on Gemma's shoulder. "He'd be proud of you, standing your ground against the likes of Peterson, but he wouldn't want you wearing yourself down to nothing." "I just need to make it to the cattle drive," Gemma said. "If we can get our herd to the railhead in Tucson with good numbers, we'll survive another year." "And what about those threats? The shot fired today," Gemma's expression hardened. "I won't be intimidated off my own land, Martha. Your courage does you credit, child, but there's a difference between bravery and foolishness. Sometimes the brave thing is knowing when to ask for help." "Who would help us?" "The sheriff thinks I should sell. The bank won't extend our loan, and every eligible bachelor in the territory sees me as either a charity case or a convenient way to acquire land." Martha gave her a knowing look. "Not everyone's against you. The Wilsons still bring their cattle to your north pasture. The Hendersons send their horses to you for breaking because no one does it better. And Judge Parker always speaks highly of how your father raised you to know this business." Gemma nodded, acknowledging the truth in Martha's words. She did have allies, even if they weren't as vocal or powerful as her enemies. I just need to hold on until the drive. After that, things will turn around. They will, Martha agreed, turning to leave. But promise me you'll keep that rifle close. Courage is admirable, but a bullet doesn't care how brave you are. After Martha left, Gemma moved to the window, gazing out at the silhouettes of the outbuildings against the star-filled sky. In the distance, she could make out the faint glow of lanterns at the bunkhouse where her remaining hands slept. Good men, loyal to her father's memory, but too few to properly manage a spread this size. Her thoughts drifted to the stranger, Eastwood. There had been something in his eyes, a sharpness, an awareness that Peterson's other men lacked. She wondered why a man like that would work for someone like Peterson. Money, most likely. In these hard times, principles often took a back seat to survival. Little did she know that Zachary Eastwood was at that very moment sitting alone by a small campfire on Peterson's property, contemplating the same meeting. He rolled a cigarette with practiced fingers, his thoughts on the determined young woman who'd stood her ground against 3 armed men without flinching. Thinking about that Grayson girl, Peterson's voice came from behind him. The rancher approached the fire, helping himself to Eastwood's coffee pot. Thinking about the situation, Zachary replied carefully. Seems unnecessary to push so hard for one small ranch. Peterson chuckled, a sound without humor. Shows what you know. That small ranch controls the only reliable water source for 10 miles in drought conditions. Old man Grayson was smart, bought up that land when nobody thought it was worth anything. And now you need it. The territory needs it in responsible hands, Peterson corrected. A woman can't manage that kind of resource, especially not a stubborn one like Gemma Grayson. Zachary took a long draw on his cigarette. She seems capable enough. She's running that place into the ground, Peterson snapped. Losing stock, unable to maintain fences. It's only a matter of time before she fails completely. And you're just helping that time come a little faster. Peterson's eyes narrowed. I hired you to track rustlers and help with the spring roundup, Eastwood, not to question my business practices. I pay well and I expect loyalty. You hired me to do a job, Zachary agreed evenly. And I will. But I don't shoot at women, and I don't intimidate them off their land. Nobody's asking you to, Peterson said too quickly. Though I can't control what every hot-headed young hand might do when they've had too much whiskey. Zachary said nothing, letting the silence speak for him. Just focus on tracking those rustlers, Peterson finally said, discomfited by Zachary's steady gaze. We've lost 30 head this month alone. After Peterson left, Zachary remained by the fire, considering what he knew and what he suspected. He hadn't taken this job by accident, and Peterson wasn't the only one paying for his services. But as he recalled the fierce determination in Gemma Grayson's eyes, he wondered if he'd underestimated the complications of this assignment. The next morning dawned clear and hot, promising another scorching day. Gemma was up before sunrise, as always, checking on a pregnant mare in the stable. The animal was due any day, and with their limited resources, every successful foal was critical. Easy, girl, she murmured, running a practiced hand over the mare's swollen belly. Not quite ready yet, are you? Another day or two, I'd reckon. Gemma whirled around to find Zachary Eastwood standing in the stable doorway, hat in hand. The early morning light cast long shadows across his face, accentuating his strong features. Mr. Eastwood, she said coldly, reaching for the revolver she kept in her waistband. You're trespassing on private property. He didn't move, showing no concern for the weapon. I came to warn you, Miss Grayson. 3 of Peterson's younger hands got liquored up last night, They were talking about running off some of your cattle, maybe setting fire to your north pasture fence. Gemma's grip tightened on her gun. And why would you tell me this? Contrary to what you might think, not everyone who works for Peterson agrees with his methods. Including you, she asked skeptically. I go where the work is, he replied, his expression unreadable. But I draw the line at certain things. Like what? Terrorizing a woman, stealing cattle, or just getting caught doing it? A faint smile touched his lips. You don't trust easily, do you? I've learned not to, she replied. Especially when it comes to men who appear out of nowhere offering help. Fair enough, he nodded toward the mare. She's carrying low, it'll be a colt. Despite herself, Gemma glanced back at the horse. My father would have said the same. Your father was James Grayson. She turned back to him, surprised. You knew him. Of him, Zachary clarified. His reputation for fair dealing extended well beyond Arizona territory. Then you understand why I won't sell to Peterson, Gemma said. My father built this ranch from nothing. He taught me everything about running it. I won't dishonor his memory by giving up. Zachary studied her for a long moment. Peterson's determined, and he has the money and men to make things difficult for you. I'm aware, she replied dryly. Now, if you've delivered your warning, I have work to do. I can help you, he said suddenly. With the mare, I've delivered more foals than I can count. Gemma hesitated, suspicion warring with practicality. She'd planned to have Tom assist her, but his arthritic hands made some of the more delicate work challenging. Why would you help me? Like I said, I draw the line at certain things. Letting a good mare suffer for lack of proper handling is one of them. After a moment's consideration, Gemma nodded. Very well, but only for the mare's sake, and I'll still be watching you, Mr. Eastwood. I wouldn't expect anything less. For the next hour they worked side by side, checking the mare's vitals and preparing the stall for the eventual birth. Despite her wariness, Gemma had to admit that Eastwood knew horses. His movements were confident but gentle, and the nervous mare seemed to calm under his touch. You have a way with them, she observed reluctantly. My father raised horses in Texas, he explained, not looking up from where he was examining the mare's hooves. Started me young. What brought you to Arizona? He straightened, meeting her gaze. The war changes a man's perspective on things. The war. She didn't need to ask which one. The conflict that had torn the nation apart had ended over a decade ago, but its shadows still lengthened over countless lives. Her own father had fought, returning with a slight limp and nightmares that occasionally woke the household. My father served as well, she offered, under General Thomas. Zachary nodded, a flicker of something recognition, respect crossing his features. Good man, Thomas. The conversation lapsed into silence as they finished their tasks. When they emerged from the stable into the brightening day, Gemma noticed Tom watching from near the corral, his expression concerned. You should go, she told Zachary. If Peterson finds out you're here, he won't, Zachary assured her. But you should move those cattle from your north pasture. Today, if possible. I don't have the hands to move them all on short notice. Then at least post someone to watch. Peterson's men will make their move tonight. Their eyes met, and Gemma found herself wanting to believe him, despite every instinct warning against it. Why are you really helping me, Mr. Eastwood? For a moment, she thought he might give her a straight answer. But then he simply touched the brim of his hat. Just trying to keep the peace, Miss Grayson. Good day to you. She watched him walk to where his horse was tethered, his movements fluid and assured. As he swung into the saddle with effortless grace, she called out, Mr. Eastwood. He turned, waiting. Thank you, she said simply, for the warning. He nodded once, then rode away, leaving Gemma to wonder if she'd just been played for a fool or if she'd found an unexpected ally in enemy territory. Tom approached as soon as Eastwood was out of earshot. What in tarnation was Peterson's man doing here? Gemma quickly relayed Zachary's warning about the north pasture. Tom frowned deeply. Could be a trap. Draw us away from the main house while they hit somewhere else. I considered that, Gemma admitted, but we can't ignore the possibility he's telling the truth. Those cattle are too valuable to risk. After some discussion, they decided to split their limited manpower. Tom would take 2 hands to move the most valuable breeding stock from the north pasture, while Gemma and the remaining men would stay vigilant around the main property. As the blazing sun began to set, casting long shadows across the drought-hardened landscape, Gemma paced the porch of the ranch house, rifle in hand. The day had passed without incident, making her increasingly anxious about the night to come. Had Eastwood been telling the truth, or had he deliberately misled her? The sound of hoofbeats brought her to attention. She raised her rifle, only to lower it when she recognized Tom riding hard toward the house, alone. "Tom," she called, hurrying down the steps as he dismounted. "What happened?" "Where are the others?" "Ambush," he gasped, clutching his side where blood seeped through his shirt. 6, maybe 7 men, came at us from the ridge. Johnson's hurt bad. Miller's holding them off, but Martha," Gemma shouted toward the house. "Tom's hurt, bring bandages." As Martha rushed to assist, Gemma turned to her remaining hands who had gathered at the commotion. "Saddle the horses. We're riding to the north pasture." "Miss Gemma," protested one of the older hands, "that's exactly what they want, to draw you out." "They've already got 2 of our men pinned down," she replied firmly, checking her rifle. "I won't abandon them." "Your father wouldn't want you risking your life," Martha said, appearing with bandages. "My father would never leave his men to die," Gemma countered. "And neither will I." 10 minutes later, Gemma rode at the head of her small force, just 3 men, all that remained of her father's once robust crew. The setting sun cast an eerie red glow over the landscape as they approached the north pasture, moving cautiously through the scrub and rocks. The crack of gunfire echoed in the distance, spurring them forward. As they crested a small rise, Gemma could make out figures taking cover behind rocks on the far side of the pasture. Her heart sank at the sight of Miller's horse lying motionless on the ground. "There," one of her men pointed, "behind that cluster of boulders. That's where the shots are coming from." Gemma assessed the situation quickly. "We'll circle around, come up from behind them. Franklin, you and Davis create a diversion from this position. Winters, you're with me." They split up, Gemma and Winters riding wide to flank the attackers while the others prepared to draw attention. As they made their approach, Gemma's mind raced. This was bolder than Peterson's usual tactics. Ambushing her men in broad daylight, maintaining an armed standoff, he was escalating dangerously. Just as they were about to make their move, a single rider appeared on the ridge above the attackers. Even in the fading light, Gemma recognized the silhouette immediately: Zachary Eastwood. For a moment her heart sank. So he had set a trap after all. But then Eastwood did something unexpected. He fired 3 shots in quick succession, not at her men, but at the rocks sheltering the attackers. Confusion erupted among Peterson's men. Shouts rose up, followed by more gunfire. In the chaos, Gemma and Winters made their move, closing in from behind while Franklin and Davis advanced from the front. "Drop your weapons," Gemma shouted as they came within range. "You're surrounded." The standoff lasted only moments longer. Outnumbered and caught by surprise, Peterson's men threw down their guns. As they emerged from their cover, hands raised, Gemma was shocked to see they weren't Peterson's regular hands at all, but rougher men she'd never seen before. "Who sent you?" she demanded, keeping her rifle trained on them. One of the men, a hard-faced individual with a scar running down his cheek, sneered. "Nobody you know, lady." "I wouldn't be so sure," came Eastwood's voice as he rode down to join them. "These men work for Silas Dawson, out of New Mexico Territory." The scarred man's eyes widened in surprise. "How did you shut up, Jenkins?" another of the men hissed. Gemma glanced at Eastwood. "Silas Dawson, the cattle baron, the same," Eastwood confirmed. "He and Peterson have been working together for months trying to control the water rights in 3 territories." "You're dead, Eastwood," Jenkins spat. "Dawson will hunt you down for this." "He can try," Eastwood replied evenly. "Wouldn't be the first time." As Gemma's men bound the attackers, she made her way to where Miller was tending to Johnson, who had taken a bullet to the shoulder but would survive. The cattle were scattered but accounted for no significant losses despite the ambush. "You saved my men," Gemma said when Eastwood approached. "Why? I told you," he replied, dismounting. "I draw the line at certain things. You knew this would happen. I suspected. Peterson's been too confident lately. When I heard Dawson's men had arrived last night, I knew they weren't here just to talk business." Gemma studied his face in the last light of dusk, trying to read the truth in his expression. "Who are you really, Mr. Eastwood?" "Because you're certainly not just Peterson's hired hand." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Let's just say I work for people who are very interested in what Peterson and Dawson are up to. The law, something like that." Before she could press further, Franklin rode up. "Miss Gemma, what do you want us to do with these men? We can't exactly take them to Sheriff Mills." She considered the problem. The local sheriff was firmly in Peterson's pocket. Even with clear evidence of an ambush, she doubted justice would be served. "We'll take them to Judge Parker in Tucson," she decided. "He's fair and he has jurisdiction over the entire territory." "That's a 2-day ride," Winters pointed out, "with wounded men and prisoners." "Then we'd better get started," she replied firmly. "Mr. Eastwood, will you be joining us?" He seemed to weigh his options before nodding. "I suppose my business with Peterson is concluded, one way or another." That night, they made camp in a defensible position near a small creek. The prisoners were securely bound and guarded, while Johnson rested as comfortably as possible given his wound. Gemma found herself sitting beside Eastwood at the campfire, both of them taking the first watch. "You still haven't told me who you really are," she said quietly, so as not to wake the others. Zachary poked at the fire with a stick. "I work for the territorial marshals, have been tracking Peterson and Dawson's operation for months." "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me?" He countered. A stranger riding in with Peterson claiming to be a lawman, she had to admit he was right. "So what is Peterson planning? Beyond trying to run me off my land?" "It's bigger than just your ranch," Zachary explained. "Peterson, Dawson, and 3 other cattle barons have been systematically buying up or driving out smaller ranchers across 3 territories. They're aiming to control all the water rights before the railroad expansion." "Water rights," Gemma repeated, understanding dawning. "That's why my father's land is so valuable. The creek that runs through our property is one of the few reliable water sources that doesn't dry up, even in drought years," Zachary finished. "Your father knew what he was doing when he settled here." Gemma stared into the fire, processing this information. "So when the railroad comes through, whoever controls the water controls everything," Zachary confirmed. "Cattle, crops, town development, they could name their price." "And you were sent to stop them," he nodded. "To gather evidence, specifically. What happened today helps, but it's not enough to bring down their whole operation." "What would be enough?" Zachary glanced at her, his expression cautious. "Written agreements, bank records. Proof that they've been coordinating their efforts to monopolize resources." Peterson keeps his important papers in a safe at his ranch house, Gemma said slowly. My father once mentioned seeing it when they were negotiating grazing rights years ago. That would be helpful information, Zachary said carefully, for someone who had a legitimate reason to access it. Their eyes met across the fire, an unspoken plan forming between them. It would be dangerous, he warned. Peterson will be furious when he learns what happened here today. I've been living with danger since my father died, Gemma replied. At least this would serve a purpose beyond mere survival. Zachary studied her for a long moment. You know, most people in your situation would have given up months ago. Most people didn't have my father, she said simply. He must have been quite a man. He was, Gemma smiled faintly at the memories. He taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Wise words, Zachary agreed, adding another log to the fire. They fell into comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts as they kept watch over the sleeping camp. Gemma found herself sneaking glances at Zachary when he wasn't looking, noticing the way the firelight played across his features, softening the hard lines of his face. There was something undeniably compelling about him, not just his looks, though he was certainly handsome in a rugged way, but the quiet competence he radiated. For the first time since her father's death, she felt the burden of responsibility lighten slightly, shared with someone who seemed genuinely capable. It was a dangerous feeling. Trust had become a luxury she couldn't afford, yet here she was, considering risking everything based on the word of a man she barely knew. The journey to Tucson was arduous. The summer heat beat down mercilessly, and the need to move slowly due to Johnson's wound and the prisoners made progress frustratingly slow. By the time they reached the outskirts of the growing town on the afternoon of the second day, everyone was exhausted and short-tempered. Tucson in 1876 was a bustling place, its streets filled with a diverse mix of people: Mexican traders, soldiers from the nearby fort, miners, cowboys, and the merchants who supplied them all. As their dusty procession made its way toward the courthouse, they drew curious stares. Judge Thomas Parker, a stern-faced man with a reputation for incorruptible justice, listened to Gemma's account with grave attention. When she finished, he turned to Zachary. Marshal Eastwood, do you corroborate Miss Grayson's statement? I do, Your Honor, Zachary confirmed. These men were hired by Silas Dawson to ambush Miss Grayson's ranch hands and rustle her cattle. It's part of a larger conspiracy between Dawson and Henry Peterson. The judge stroked his beard thoughtfully. Serious allegations. Do you have proof of this conspiracy? Not yet, Zachary admitted. But these men will testify in exchange for reduced sentences. The scarred man, Jenkins, spat on the floor. I ain't saying nothing against Mr. Dawson. That's a death sentence. Suit yourself, the judge said mildly. Armed ambush and attempted murder will get you 20 years in Yuma prison. I hear it's particularly unpleasant in the summer months. The prisoners exchanged uneasy glances, their bravado faltering. However, Parker continued, if you were to provide useful information about your employer's illegal activities, I might be persuaded to show leniency. By sunset, 2 of the 5 prisoners had agreed to testify, providing sworn statements about Dawson's orders to terrorize Gemma's ranch and steal her cattle. It wasn't the full conspiracy Zachary sought, but it was enough to hold the men and issue warrants for Dawson's arrest. This won't stop Peterson, Gemma said as she and Zachary left the courthouse. If anything, it will make him more desperate. Which is exactly what we need, Zachary replied. Desperate men make mistakes. They took rooms at a modest hotel near the courthouse, arranging for Johnson to be treated by the town doctor. Over dinner in the hotel's small restaurant, they discussed their next move. "I should return to the ranch," Gemma said. "Martha and the others will be worried, and there's too much work to be left undone." "Peterson will be watching your place," Zachary warned. "He'll know something went wrong when his men don't return. All the more reason I should be there. I won't hide while others defend what's mine." Zachary leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Gemma, Miss Grayson, I admire your courage, but there's a difference between bravery and recklessness. If Peterson suspects you're working with the law, you'll be in even more danger." "Then, what do you suggest?" "That I stay away from my home indefinitely. Just for a few more days," he urged. "Give me time to gather the evidence we need. Once we have proof of the conspiracy, Judge Parker can issue warrants for Peterson and the others. This ends not just with your ranch safe, but with them facing justice for everything they've done." Gemma considered his words. The practical part of her knew he was right. Her presence at the ranch would only escalate tensions. Yet the thought of remaining in town while others faced danger on her behalf went against everything she believed. 2 days, she finally conceded. "I'll give you 2 days to find this evidence. After that, I'm returning home with or without you." Relief crossed Zachary's features. "That's all I ask." As they finished their meal, a young boy entered the restaurant, scanning the room until his eyes settled on their table. He approached tentatively. "Are you Marshal Eastwood?" he asked. Zachary nodded, instantly alert. "Telegram for you, sir." The boy handed over a sealed envelope. "Man at the office said it was urgent." Zachary tipped the boy and opened the message, his expression growing grave as he read. "What is it?" Gemma asked when the boy had gone. "Peterson knows," Zachary said grimly. "One of his men must have seen us bringing in the prisoners. He's cleared out his ranch, took everything, including whatever documents might have been in that safe." Gemma's heart sank. "So we have nothing." "Not nothing," Zachary corrected. "The telegram is from my superior in Santa Fe. They've arrested one of Dawson's associates in Albuquerque with incriminating bank drafts. It's not enough to prove the whole conspiracy, but it's a start. And Peterson, still free but running. Running men leave trails." Despite the setback, Gemma felt a spark of hope. For the first time since her father's death, someone with authority was taking action against Peterson. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. That night, in the privacy of her hotel room, Gemma allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. The strain of the past months, the constant threats, the financial worries, the weight of responsibility crashed over her like a wave. She sank onto the edge of the bed, hands trembling as she unpinned her hair. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Who is it?" "Eastwood," came the reply. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Hastily wiping her eyes, she crossed to the door, opening it just enough to see him standing in the hallway. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No, I just—" He paused, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." Today was difficult. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then sighed at his skeptical look. "As fine as can be expected. May I come in? Just for a moment." Propriety dictated she refuse, but something in his expression, concern without pity, respect without condescension, made her step aside. He entered the room, keeping a respectful distance as she closed the door. "I received another telegram," he explained. "Peterson was spotted heading toward New Mexico territory, if he's joining forces with Dawson." "Then they're planning something," Gemma finished. "Something that involves my ranch, most likely." He hesitated, then continued. "I've been authorized to offer you protection, official protection from the territorial marshals." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I would stay at your ranch openly as a federal presence. It might deter further attacks, at least until we can build a stronger case." Gemma considered the offer. Having a marshal on her property would certainly send a message to Peterson and his allies. But it would also be admitting she couldn't protect her land alone, something she'd fought against acknowledging for months. "I don't need a protector, Mr. Eastwood," she said finally. "What I need is justice." "Then consider me an instrument of that justice," he replied. "Not a protector, but an ally." She studied his face, searching for any hint of the condescension she'd grown accustomed to from men. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "Very well. An alliance it is." Something shifted between them in that moment, a mutual recognition of respect, of shared purpose. And perhaps something more, something neither was ready to name. "We should leave for the ranch tomorrow," Zachary said, breaking the charged silence. "The sooner we establish a visible federal presence, the better." "Agreed," Gemma replied. "We'll take the northern route. It's longer but less likely to be watched." As he turned to leave, Gemma impulsively reached out, catching his arm. "Thank you for believing me, for helping when you didn't have to." His eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. "You'd be surprised how rarely I've met someone truly worth helping, Miss Grayson." After he left, Gemma stood motionless, her hand still warm from the contact with his arm. For the first time in months, the crushing loneliness of her situation eased. Whatever came next, she would face it not alone, but with an ally she was beginning to trust. The return journey to the Grayson ranch took 2 full days, with Zachary insisting they avoid the main roads and travel only during daylight hours. By the time they crested the final ridge overlooking the ranch, Gemma was both exhausted and anxious to see what had transpired in her absence. The sight that greeted them sent ice through her veins. A plume of black smoke rose from the direction of the ranch house. "No," she breathed, urging her horse forward. "Gemma, wait," Zachary called, spurring his mount to catch up. "It could be a trap." She barely heard him, consumed by fear for Martha, Tom, and the others she'd left behind. As they galloped down the slope, details emerged through the haze of smoke and dust. The main house still stood, but the stable and one of the outbuildings were engulfed in flames. Figures moved frantically around the property, passing buckets of water in a desperate attempt to contain the blaze. "Martha!" Gemma shouted as they rode into the yard. Tom, the housekeeper, emerged from the chaos, her face streaked with soot but mercifully unharmed. "Oh, Miss Gemma, thank the Lord you're back." Gemma dismounted in a rush, embracing the older woman briefly before turning to assess the damage. "What happened? Is everyone all right?" "They came before dawn," Martha explained, her voice shaking. 6 or 7 of them, faces covered, set fire to the stable first, then the storehouse. Tom tried to stop them, but they beat him something awful. "Where is he now?" Gemma demanded. "In the house with Eliza tending to him. He'll live, but he's in a bad way." Zachary had already joined the bucket line, directing the efforts to save what they could. Gemma moved to help, but Martha caught her arm. "There's more, Miss Gemma. They left a message." "What message?" Martha led her to the front of the house, where crude letters had been painted across the whitewashed porch. "Sell or burn." Rage unlike anything Gemma had ever experienced coursed through her. This was no longer just about intimidation or forcing her out. Peterson was willing to destroy everything, to risk lives, to get what he wanted. By sundown, they'd managed to save the house and the bunkhouse, though the stable and storehouse were complete losses. The livestock, mercifully, had been mostly in the pastures, though 2 horses had perished in the stable fire. Tom was badly beaten but would recover with time, and no one else had been seriously hurt. As Gemma sat on the porch steps, surveying the smoldering ruins of her stable, Zachary joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "We'll rebuild," he said quietly. She accepted the coffee but didn't drink. "With what?" The money I was counting on from the cattle drive will barely cover our existing debts. Judge Parker will issue warrants based on this, Zachary assured her. Arson, attempted murder. Peterson has gone too far. He'll face justice. Justice won't rebuild my stable or replace my horses or feed my people through the winter, Gemma replied bitterly. No, Zachary agreed, but it will stop the man who's trying to destroy everything you've built. She looked up at him then, really looked, seeing the determination in his eyes, the unwavering conviction. You really believe we can beat him, don't you? I know we can, he said simply. Because men like Peterson always make the same mistake. They underestimate those they consider beneath them. They see your gender as a weakness, your principles as naivety, your determination as stubbornness. They don't understand that those very things are your greatest strengths. His words washed over her like a balm, not because they were comforting, but because they acknowledged her struggle without diminishing it. He didn't offer empty reassurances or suggest she leave the fighting to others. He recognized her as an equal in this battle. We should post guards tonight, she said, standing with renewed purpose. Peterson might send more men to finish what they started. Already arranged, Zachary replied. 2 men at a time, rotating shifts. I'll take the first watch myself. As they moved to check on the others, Martha approached from the house. Miss Gemma, there's something you should know. When those men came, they weren't just looking to cause damage. They were searching for something. Searching for what? I don't know for certain, but they kept asking where your father's study was, where he kept his papers. They tore the place apart before they started the fires. Gemma and Zachary exchanged glances. Did they find anything? Gemma asked. Not that I could tell, Martha replied. Most of your father's important papers are in the bank in Tucson, aren't they? Yes, Gemma confirmed. The deed to the ranch, his will, those sorts of things. But his journals and personal correspondence he kept here. What kind of personal correspondence? Zachary asked sharply. Gemma frowned, thinking. Letters, mostly. From other ranchers, from the Cattlemen's Association, from his attorneys. Nothing that would interest Peterson, surely. Unless. Zachary's expression grew intense. Your father was well respected in the territory. If he had suspicions about Peterson's schemes, if he documented anything. Understanding dawned on Gemma. Father was meticulous about keeping records. He documented every cattle sale, every water rights agreement, every conversation with neighboring ranchers. And if he'd noticed a pattern of small ranchers being driven out, water rights being consolidated, he would have written it down, Gemma finished, and possibly shared his concerns with others. They hurried to the study, which had been ransacked but not burned. Books and papers were strewn across the floor, drawers pulled out and emptied, the large oak desk overturned. They were thorough, Zachary observed grimly. Gemma surveyed the chaos, trying to think like her father. Where would he have hidden something truly important? Something he wouldn't want found by casual intruders. Her eyes settled on the large portrait of her mother that hung on the wall, miraculously undamaged in the search. Help me with this, she said, moving toward the painting. Together, they carefully removed the heavy frame from the wall, revealing nothing but solid wood behind it. Gemma ran her fingers along the edge of the frame itself, feeling for any irregularity. Near the bottom corner, she found a small catch that, when pressed, revealed a hidden compartment built into the thick wooden frame. Inside was a slim leather journal and a bundle of letters tied with string. Clever man, your father, Zachary said softly. Gemma opened the journal with trembling fingers, recognizing her father's neat, precise handwriting. The entries dated back 3 years, detailing his growing concerns about the pattern of land acquisitions in the territory. He named names Peterson, Dawson, and 3 others and documented suspicious incidents. Ranchers forced out after mysterious cattle deaths or unexplained fires, water sources suddenly diverted or contaminated, loans called in without warning. "This is it," Zachary breathed, reading over her shoulder. "This is exactly what we need. Your father was building a case against them." "He never said anything to me," Gemma said, a mixture of pride and sorrow washing over her. "He was protecting me. And now you're finishing what he started." The letters proved equally valuable correspondence with other ranchers who shared similar concerns, with a bank examiner who noticed irregular transactions, with a retired judge who'd suggested legal strategies for fighting back against the land grabbers. "We need to get these to Judge Parker immediately," Zachary said. "With this evidence, plus the testimony we already have, he can issue warrants for the entire group." "I'll go," Gemma decided. "First thing tomorrow, you should stay here in case Peterson's men return." Zachary shook his head. "It's too dangerous for you to travel alone. We'll both go, and we'll take 2 of your most trusted hands as additional security." She wanted to argue but knew he was right. The documents were too valuable to risk, and Peterson was clearly desperate enough to try anything. That night, after securing the precious papers in Zachary's saddlebags, Gemma found herself unable to sleep. The events of the day, the destruction of her property, the discovery of her father's secret investigation, the growing certainty that they finally had a chance to stop Peterson left her mind racing. She slipped out of the house, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cool night air. The yard was quiet, the charred remains of the stable and storehouse dark silhouettes against the star-filled sky. Movement near the corral caught her eye. Zachary, walking the perimeter of the property, rifle in hand. He noticed her almost immediately, changing course to join her on the porch. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Too much to think about." He nodded in understanding, leaning his rifle against the porch railing. "Your father would be proud, you know. Not many would have fought as hard as you have." "Sometimes I wonder if I'm fighting out of stubbornness rather than sense," she admitted. "If I'm risking too much just to prove a point. And what point would that be? That I can do this. That a woman can run a ranch successfully without a husband or a father or a brother making decisions for her." Zachary considered this. "Is that really why you've held on so tightly? To prove something to others?" Gemma stared out at the land she loved, silver washed in moonlight despite the destruction of the day. "No," she said finally. "I've held on because this is my home. Because every sunrise over those mountains, every calf born in our pastures, every storm that sweeps across this valley, they're part of me. I belong here." "Then you're not fighting out of stubbornness," Zachary said simply. "You're fighting for love. There's no greater courage than that." Their eyes met in the moonlight, and something shifted between them, a recognition, a connection that transcended their shared purpose. "I should check the north boundary," Zachary said, breaking the moment reluctantly. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." As he moved away, Gemma called after him softly, "Mr. Eastwood, Zachary." He turned, waiting. "Thank you for understanding." A smile touched his lips, genuine and warm. "Good night, Gemma." She watched him disappear into the darkness, her heart beating with an unfamiliar rhythm. In the midst of all the danger and uncertainty, something new was taking root, something she hadn't dared contemplate since her father's death had thrust her into this fight for survival. Hope. The journey to Tucson the next day was tense but uneventful. Gemma, Zachary, and 2 of her most trusted hands traveled armed and vigilant, taking an indirect route to avoid potential ambushes. The precious documents were distributed between them, ensuring that even if one was captured, the evidence would still reach Judge Parker. Their caution proved warranted when, just outside of Tucson, they spotted 3 riders watching the main road from a ridge. "Peterson's men," Zachary muttered, signaling the group to take cover behind a stand of mesquite. "How could they know we were coming?" Gemma asked. "They don't, necessarily, but they'd guess we'd head for the law eventually." They waited until the lookouts moved on, then continued to town via a dry creek bed that offered cover from distant eyes. Judge Parker received them immediately, his interest piqued by the urgency in Zachary's message. As he read through James Grayson's journal and letters, his expression grew increasingly grave. "This is damning evidence," he said finally, looking up at them. "Conspiracy, extortion, even murder if what your father suspected about the Coleman fire is true." He turned to his clerk. "Draw up warrants for Peterson, Dawson, and the others named here. Send telegrams to every law enforcement office in the territory. I want these men found and brought to justice." Relief washed over Gemma. After months of fighting alone, of being dismissed and threatened, of watching her father's legacy crumble piece by piece, finally someone with authority was taking action. "What about Miss Grayson's ranch?" Zachary asked. "Peterson's men have already burned 2 buildings." "They won't stop until they have what they want." The judge stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I can spare 2 deputies to accompany you back to the ranch, not indefinitely, mind you, but until the immediate threat is dealt with." "Thank you, Your Honor," Gemma said sincerely. As they left the courthouse, a wave of exhaustion hit Gemma. The constant tension of the past days, of the past months, really had taken its toll. Zachary noticed her faltering step and gently took her elbow. "You should rest before we head back," he said. "The deputies won't be ready to leave until morning anyway." She wanted to argue but knew he was right. They secured rooms at the same hotel as before, and Gemma gratefully retreated to hers, falling into a deep sleep almost as soon as her head touched the pillow. She woke to urgent knocking hours later. Disoriented, she stumbled to the door, opening it to find Zachary, his expression tense. "Get dressed quickly," he said. "Peterson's been spotted in town." Fully alert now, Gemma hurried to comply, gathering her few belongings as Zachary explained through the door. One of the deputies recognized him at the saloon across from the hotel. "He's not alone, at least 5 men with him. They're asking questions about us." "How did he know we were here?" "Small town. We weren't exactly inconspicuous riding in with an armed escort." Within minutes, Gemma was ready, her hair hastily pinned beneath her hat. Zachary led her down the back stairs of the hotel to where their horses were already saddled, the 2 deputies waiting. "We'll take the south road out of town," one of the deputies said. "Circle back to the ranch from there." They moved quietly through the darkened streets, keeping to the shadows. As they passed the saloon, Gemma couldn't resist glancing through the window. There, at a corner table, sat Henry Peterson, his face flushed with drink but his eyes alert. The sight of the man who'd threatened her, who'd burned her buildings and beaten her ranch hand, sent a surge of anger through her. "Keep moving," Zachary murmured, noting her hesitation. "This isn't the time." They reached the edge of town without incident, urging their horses to a gallop once they hit the open road. The night was clear, the quarter moon providing just enough light to navigate. They'd covered perhaps 2 miles when the sound of pursuing horses reached them. "Ride harder," Zachary called. "They've spotted us." Gemma leaned low over her horse's neck, urging the animal to greater speed. The deputies flanked her while Zachary took up the rear position, occasionally glancing back at their pursuers. "They're gaining," one of the deputies shouted. Gemma's mind raced. They couldn't outrun Peterson's men indefinitely, and a straight chase would only tire their horses, leaving them vulnerable later. They needed a plan. "The canyon," she called, pointing to a dark opening in the landscape ahead. "We can lose them there." The narrow canyon was a risky choice. Its twisting passages could provide cover, but also potential traps if Peterson's men knew the terrain. But it was their best option for breaking the direct pursuit. They plunged into the darkness of the canyon, the sound of hooves echoing off the high stone walls. Gemma led the way, having hunted this area with her father years before. The main passage soon split into multiple branches. "This way," she directed, taking the leftmost fork. "There's a place ahead where we can set up an ambush." Zachary looked at her with surprise and something like admiration. "Lead on." The passage narrowed further, forcing them to ride single file. After a quarter-mile, it opened into a small box canyon with steep walls on 3 sides. "Here," Gemma said, dismounting. "We can position ourselves on those ledges. When they follow us in, we'll have the high ground," Zachary finished, already helping her secure the horses at the back of the canyon. The deputies quickly understood the plan, and all 4 climbed to defensive positions on the rocky ledges overlooking the entrance to the box canyon. They'd barely settled into place when the sounds of pursuit echoed through the passage. "Hold your fire until they're all in," Zachary whispered. "We want to end this in one volley." Peterson's men approached cautiously, clearly aware they were riding into potential danger. The leader, not Peterson himself, Gemma noted, signaled his companions to spread out as they entered the wider space. "Now!" Zachary shouted, and 4 rifles fired simultaneously. The ambush worked perfectly. 2 of Peterson's men fell immediately, while the others scrambled for cover, returning fire blindly into the darkness above them. "Throw down your weapons," one of the deputies called. "You're facing federal marshals." For answer, another volley of gunfire ricocheted off the rocks near Gemma's position. She ducked lower, then carefully aimed at a shadow moving between boulders. Her shot caught the man in the shoulder, spinning him into the open. The firefight continued for several tense minutes before one of the remaining men called out, "Hold your fire, we're done." "Weapons on the ground, hands where we can see them," Zachary ordered. Slowly, 3 men emerged from cover, their hands raised. As the deputies moved to secure them, Zachary turned to Gemma. "That was some quick thinking," he said. "I wouldn't have known about this place." "My father used to say knowledge of the land is often the only advantage the outnumbered have," she replied, climbing down from her position. As they approached the captured men, Gemma realized with disappointment that Peterson wasn't among them. "Where's your boss?" she demanded. The apparent leader, a hard-faced man with a bullet graze on his arm, smirked. "Mr. Peterson had other business. Said to give you his regards, though." "What other business?" Zachary asked sharply. The man just smiled, saying nothing more. A cold dread settled in Gemma's stomach. "The ranch," she said, meeting Zachary's eyes. "He's going for the ranch while we're away." Without waiting for confirmation, she hurried to her horse. "We need to ride back. Now." One deputy remained with the prisoners, arranging to transport them to Tucson at first light, while the other accompanied Gemma and Zachary on their desperate race back to the Grayson ranch. They rode hard through the night, pushing their mounts to the limit of endurance. As dawn broke, they crested the final ridge overlooking the ranch, and Gemma's worst fears were confirmed. Smoke rose from multiple buildings, and even from this distance, they could see men moving about the property like ants, systematically destroying everything in sight. "We're too late," she whispered, devastation washing over her. "No," Zachary said firmly. "As long as we're breathing, it's not too late. Your people might still be alive, fighting back." The deputy scanned the scene through a spyglass. "I count at least 8 men. Peterson's there too. I recognize him from the wanted poster." "We need a plan," Gemma said, forcing down her panic. We can't just ride in 3 against 8, Zachary nodded, thinking quickly. The creek bed runs behind the main house, doesn't it? We could approach that way under cover. And then what? Even if we reach the house unseen, we're still outnumbered. Not necessarily, Zachary replied. Your hands who weren't at the ranch when we left, where would they be? The north pasture, most likely. We were moving cattle there before all this started. Send the deputy to gather them. Meanwhile, you and I will get as close as we can, assess the situation. Maybe create a diversion to keep Peterson's men occupied until help arrives. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. The deputy rode off toward the north pasture while Gemma and Zachary worked their way down to the creek bed, approaching the ranch from behind. As they drew closer, the extent of the destruction became clear. The bunkhouse was burning, the corral fences torn down, and several dead cattle lay in the yard. Rage and grief warred within Gemma as she took in the deliberate devastation of her home. They reached the back of the main house without being spotted. Through a window, Gemma could see Martha and Eliza tied to chairs in the kitchen, while 2 armed men stood guard. Of Tom and the other hands who'd remained at the ranch, there was no sign. They're alive, Zachary whispered, noting the relief in Gemma's expression. That's something. We need to get them out. First, we need to even the odds a bit. Zachary surveyed the yard where 3 of Peterson's men were setting fire to the hay storage. If we can pick those 3 off quietly. The woodshed, Gemma suggested. We can circle around behind it, use it for cover. They moved silently, years of hunting experience making Gemma as stealthy as any tracker. When they reached the woodshed, they paused, planning their next move. I'll take the 2 on the left, Zachary said. You get the one by the well, on my signal. Gemma nodded, raising her rifle. She sighted carefully on her target, a burly man who'd paused to drink from the well bucket. Zachary fired first, dropping 1 man instantly. Gemma's shot followed a split second later, catching her target in the leg. The 3rd man spun around, firing wildly in their direction before Zachary's 2nd shot silenced him. The commotion brought the remaining men running from various points around the property. Gemma and Zachary ducked lower behind the woodshed as bullets splintered the wood above their heads. 4 down, 4 to go, Zachary said grimly. Plus Peterson. We need to move, Gemma urged. This position won't hold for long. As if to emphasize her point, one of Peterson's men began circling toward the back of the woodshed. Gemma sighted quickly and fired, winging him but not stopping his advance. Run for the house, Zachary shouted, providing covering fire as Gemma sprinted for the back door. She reached it and found it locked. Without hesitation, she smashed a window with the butt of her rifle, reached in to unlatch the door, and burst into the kitchen. The 2 guards turned in surprise, raising their weapons. Gemma fired at one while diving for cover behind the heavy oak table. The guard fell, but the 2nd got off a shot that splintered the wood near her head. Before he could fire again, Zachary appeared in the doorway behind him, pistol raised. Drop it, he ordered. The man hesitated, then slowly lowered his gun. Gemma, thank the Lord. Martha cried from her bound position. Keeping her rifle trained on the surrendered guard, Gemma moved to untie Martha and Eliza. Are you hurt? Where's Tom and the others? They took the men to the barn, Eliza sobbed. Said they were going to hang them as rustlers. Horror washed over Gemma. When? Peterson said at noon, Martha replied, rubbing her chafed wrists. Said he wanted to make an example. Gemma checked the clock on the wall, 11:40. 20 minutes. We need to move now, she told Zachary, who had secured the guard. Peterson's at the barn with Tom and the others. Outside, gunfire had ceased temporarily, an eerie silence falling over the ranch yard. Miss Grayson, Peterson's voice called from the direction of the barn. I know you're in there. Come out and maybe I'll let your men live." Gemma moved to the window, staying to one side to avoid presenting a target. In the yard between the house and the barn, Henry Peterson stood with a pistol pointed at Tom's head. Behind them, 3 more of her ranch hands knelt with nooses around their necks, the ropes thrown over the barn rafters. "Don't do it," Zachary warned, seeing the determination in her eyes. "He'll kill you all." "I can't let them die," Gemma replied. "Not for me, not for this land." "There's another way," Zachary insisted. "The deputy should be back with your north pasture hands any minute." "If we can stall 1 minute, Miss Grayson," Peterson shouted. "Or I start with the old man here." He pressed the gun harder against Tom's temple, making the older man wince. "I'm coming out," Gemma called back. "Don't hurt him." "Gemma, no." Zachary grabbed her arm. "He's desperate. The law's closing in on him. He has nothing to lose." "Neither do I," she replied softly. "Not if I let good men die for my sake." Something in her expression must have reached him because Zachary's grip loosened. "Then we go together. I'll cover you from the porch." "No," Gemma shook her head. "He'll shoot you on sight. Let me talk to him first. You position yourself where you can get a clear shot if things go wrong." It was a testament to his growing respect for her that Zachary didn't argue further. Instead, he nodded grimly. "Be careful." Gemma stepped onto the front porch, rifle held vertically to show she wasn't aiming it. "Let them go, Peterson," she called. "Your quarrel is with me." Peterson laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "My quarrel is with anyone who stands in my way, girl." Your father understood that in the end. Ice filled Gemma's veins. "What are you talking about? You think that fall from his horse was an accident?" Peterson taunted. "Man like James Grayson, best rider in the territory, just happens to break his neck when he's gathering evidence against me." "Come now." Rage unlike anything Gemma had ever known surged through her. "You murdered my father. Business is business," Peterson shrugged. "Now put down that rifle and come here, or your foreman gets the same treatment." Moving with deliberate slowness, Gemma placed her rifle on the porch and descended the steps. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Zachary moving along the side of the house, seeking a better position. "That's it," Peterson encouraged as she approached. "You're finally being sensible." When she was 10 feet away, he gestured for her to stop. "Now you're going to sign this deed," he said, pulling a folded document from his vest pocket. "Transferring all rights to this property to me. Do that and maybe I let your people go." "And if I refuse?" Peterson's smile was cold. "Then they hang and you get to watch before I put a bullet in you." Gemma held his gaze, measuring the distance between them, the position of his gun, the tension in his trigger finger. "My father always said you were a coward, Peterson. Hiding behind hired guns, threatening women and old men." He was right. Anger flashed in Peterson's eyes. "Your father was a fool who didn't understand progress. This territory is changing. Men like me are the future. Men with vision, with connections to the railroads and the banks. Men who murder and threaten and destroy what others have built," Gemma countered. "That's not progress, Peterson. It's just greed wearing a new coat." Peterson's face darkened. "Enough talk. Sign the deed or watch them hang." From the corner of her eye, Gemma could see movement at the edge of the property riders approaching quietly from the north. The deputy had returned with reinforcements. She just needed to stall a little longer. "I'll sign," she said, taking a step forward. "But I want to see the document first." "Make sure it's legal." Peterson hesitated, then extended the paper toward her. As she reached for it, a gunshot cracked from somewhere to her left, not from Zachary's position. Peterson jerked, a look of surprise crossing his face as a red stain bloomed on his shirt front. He staggered, his gun wavering from Tom's head. In that moment, chaos erupted. Gemma tackled Tom to the ground as Peterson fired wildly. Zachary emerged from cover, shooting the man nearest the barn. The newly arrived ranch hands charged into the yard, guns blazing. The firefight was brief but intense. When it ended, Peterson lay dead in the dust, along with two of his men. The others had either fled or surrendered. Gemma helped Tom to his feet, quickly checking him for injuries before cutting the nooses from her other hands. "Is everyone all right?" she asked, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "Thanks to you, Miss Gemma," Tom replied. "You came back for us." "Of course I did," she said simply. "You're my people." As the deputy organized the prisoners and Martha tended to the wounded, Zachary approached Gemma, his expression a mixture of relief and admiration. "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most foolish," he said. "Sometimes there's not much difference," she replied. "But I couldn't let him hurt anyone else, not after what he did to my father." Zachary's expression softened. "I'm sorry about your father. Peterson will face justice now, even if it's not in a courtroom." Gemma looked around at the destruction of her ranch buildings burned, fences destroyed, cattle killed. The task of rebuilding seemed overwhelming. "It will take months to restore everything," she said quietly. "You're not alone this time," Zachary reminded her. "Your neighbors will help. The law is on your side now. And you," she asked, meeting his eyes, "will you stay?" It was the first time either had acknowledged that their connection had grown beyond professional respect or even friendship. In the midst of danger and destruction, something else had taken root, something neither had been looking for but both now recognized. "My assignment was to gather evidence against Peterson and his allies," Zachary said carefully. "With him dead and Dawson soon to be arrested, that work is essentially complete." Disappointment washed over Gemma, though she tried not to show it. "I understand. You have other duties." "I do," he agreed, "but I've been thinking about a change. The territorial marshals always need good men stationed throughout Arizona." He paused, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "If I were to request a permanent posting in this area, would that be welcome?" Hope blossomed in Gemma's heart. "Very welcome," she replied softly. Their eyes met, an unspoken promise passing between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. In the weeks that followed, the full extent of Peterson and Dawson's conspiracy was revealed. James Grayson's meticulous documentation, combined with testimony from those arrested, exposed a scheme involving corrupt bank officials, bribed local lawmen, and systematic intimidation of small ranchers across 3 territories. Judge Parker personally oversaw the proceedings, ensuring that justice was served. Rebuilding the Grayson Ranch was a community effort. Neighbors who'd been too frightened to openly support Gemma during Peterson's reign of terror now came forward with offers of help. Barns were raised, fences mended, and new livestock purchased with loans that, for once, came without predatory terms. Through it all, Zachary remained, first as an official presence ensuring the rule of law, then as something more. His request for permanent assignment to the area was granted, allowing him to establish a small marshal's office in the nearby town while spending most of his time at the ranch. By the time the autumn cattle drive was completed successfully, despite the challenges of the past year, Gemma and Zachary's relationship had deepened into something neither could ignore. One evening, as they sat on the newly rebuilt porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Zachary finally gave voice to what had been growing between them. "I've never met anyone like you, Gemma Grayson," he said, his voice soft in the twilight. "When I first saw you standing up to Peterson that day, I thought you were either incredibly brave or incredibly stubborn." Gemma smiled. "And now I know you're both," he replied, taking her hand in his, "and I love you for it." The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Gemma turned to face him fully, seeing in his eyes the same certainty she felt in her heart. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have since you rode back to warn us about the cattle raid." "That long," he teased gently. "I've been hoping since you ambushed Peterson's men in that box canyon." Gemma laughed, the sound carrying across the ranch yard. "We make quite a pair, don't we? The stubborn rancher and the undercover marshal." "We do," he agreed, his expression growing serious. "And I'd like to make it official if you would." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small silver ring. "This was my mother's. I've carried it with me for years, waiting for the right person to give it to. I never thought I'd find her in the middle of an investigation, standing her ground against impossible odds." Gemma's breath caught as he slid off the porch step to one knee before her. "Gemma Grayson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow but of a joy she had not expected to find after all the hardship of the past year. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she added with a smile, "But I'm keeping my ranch in my name." Zachary laughed, rising to sit beside her again. "I wouldn't have it any other way. This land is part of who you are. I'd never ask you to give it up. And your work as a marshal." "The territory needs law and order," he said. "But I think I can serve justice just as well from here as from anywhere else." They sealed their promise with a kiss as the last light faded from the sky, stars beginning to appear above the land they both loved. Spring came early the following year, bringing with it new life to the ranch. Calves frolicked in green pastures, fruit trees burst into bloom around the house, and on a perfect April day, Gemma Grayson became Gemma Eastwood in a ceremony attended by the entire community. Judge Parker himself officiated, having become a staunch ally and friend during the trials of Peterson's associates. As the newly married couple greeted their guests after the ceremony, Martha approached with tears of happiness in her eyes. "Your father would be so proud of you, child," she said, embracing Gemma. "Not just for saving the ranch, but for finding someone worthy of you." "I think he would have liked Zachary," Gemma agreed, glancing at her husband who was deep in conversation with Tom about the spring roundup. "Oh, he would have," Martha nodded firmly. "A man who sees your strength as something to admire rather than tame. James would have approved heartily." Later, as they danced under lanterns strung between the newly rebuilt barn and the main house, Zachary pulled Gemma close. "Happy, Mrs. Eastwood?" he murmured. "Very," she replied, her green eyes bright with joy, "though I'm still getting used to the name." "Take your time," he smiled. "We have plenty of it now," and they did. The years that followed brought prosperity to the Grayson Eastwood Ranch, as Gemma insisted on calling it. Under their joint management, it became one of the most successful operations in the territory. Zachary's position as marshal brought stability to the region, while Gemma's innovative ranching methods earned respect throughout the Cattlemen's Association, which eventually elected her as its first female member, despite considerable initial opposition. Their first child, a son named James after Gemma's father, arrived the following spring, followed 2 years later by a daughter they called Elizabeth. Both children grew up learning the value of the land and the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they watched their children playing in the yard that had once been a battlefield, Zachary pulled Gemma close. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I first came to this territory, I thought my job was to uphold the law. I didn't realize I'd find something far more important." "And what's that?" Gemma asked, though she already knew the answer. "A woman whose courage is questioned daily by those around her," he replied, kissing her softly. "The bravest person I know." Gemma smiled against his lips, thinking of all they had overcome and all that still lay ahead. The territory was changing, statehood on the horizon, new challenges and opportunities arising with each passing year. But whatever came next, they would face it together, the stubborn rancher and her marshal, partners in every sense of the word. And that, she knew, was the greatest victory of all.